10 days before Christmas, I was diagnosed with a heart condition called atrial fibrillation. 3 days later, I caught COVID, and 3 days after that, on a Sunday night, I was rushed into hospital at 2 a.m. with really bad stomach pains. The doctors at the hospital wheeled me straight away to a high-tech room where I had a CT scan, where I was sent through a tube that whirred and whizzed and looked for things that weren't right with me. As I was pulled out of the tube through a glass window in a room next door, I could see a nurse and a consultant staring ashen-faced and pointing at my results on a computer monitor. I motioned at them to ask if I could see the results, but they shook their heads and said no. Things seemed like they had gone quite badly. I asked them what they had seen, but they said they couldn't be sure. The results had to be sent away to a virtual expert to be analysed. I was told the results should be back in the next 5 hours. As I was wheeled back to my hospital cubicle, I was sure that the news would be bad. That was my lowest point. As I lay there in the dark waiting for the results, all I thought of were Rosie, my wife, and my 3 daughters, Meg, Lily and Hetty. It was Hetty's 14th birthday that day. The demons in my head were running riot at this point, and I listened to every footstep in the ward thinking it was going to be my results. 3 long hours passed when a nurse popped her head through the curtains and cheerfully said, "Everything's fine with the CT scan, you can go home now." I could have kissed her. It turned out that what they saw on the CT scan were just image artifacts, just little distortions in the imaging software. I have no confirmation of what was causing my pain. My suspicion was that it was a reaction to COVID or the new meds I was on. My doctor later told me the nurse and consultant were worried my arteries were ripping from my insides, but I was fine apart from my heart. Atrial fibrillation is a condition where your heart rhythm is irregular, a bit like a bad jazz drummer rather than a clock. It also beats higher than normal. In my case, my heart had been going at 130 beats per minute, night and day, which caused me to be shattered by about 2 p.m. each day. If you have stumbled across this video searching for atrial fibrillation, then don't worry too much. Atrial fibrillation is a very common heart condition and can be treated, and you will be fine. Luckily for me, one of my cycling buddies, Dr. Tom Johnson, is a top heart surgeon. He was able to talk me through my diagnosis and steer me away from complete panic. He also recommended another top heart surgeon, Dr. Ashley Nesbitt, who specialises in treating atrial fibrillation. Tom also told me not to worry and that I would be fine. I'm no medical expert. It seems there are 3 main treatments for atrial fibrillation. 1, you can go on meds, typically beta blockers and blood thinners. 2, you can have a cardioversion, which is where they shock your heart to get it back in rhythm. Or 3, you can have an atrial ablation. This is where they stick wires into your heart up from your groin and zap the cells that are causing the erroneous electrical signals. It was decided that an atrial ablation would be best for me, and just for fun, I also had a cardioversion as part of my procedure. Later in this video, I'll cover what happened to me, but first you're probably thinking, what the heck has this got to do with the WordPress Gutenberg Block Editor? Well, here's the thing. Having a heart operation is an emotional process. You go through a whole gamut of feelings, and things that you took for granted suddenly become hyper important. A few weeks before my operation, I was on the Bob WP podcast, and he asked me about Gutenberg and how many in the WordPress community were upset about how it was implemented. I rather blithely answered that I never really felt part of the WordPress community or that I could impact the development of WordPress. So I personally didn't feel that emotional about how it had upset people. I look back at that answer with lots of regret. Before and after my heart operation, my family and my friends were there for me in spades. My WordPress friends have been amazingly supportive. This support network is everything to me. WordPress is far more than just a piece of software. What made WordPress great and dominate the market was the community, the family of people who care deeply for what it symbolizes. WordPress was never the best content management. It was never built on the best technology. What made it the best was the WordPress family. And I realize now that neglecting this family has been a huge mistake. Don't get me wrong, I love Gutenberg, but I now see how damaging the way Gutenberg was implemented has been. WordPress has managed to turn some WordPress evangelists almost completely away from the platform that they once loved. Thoughtful, kind and bright people like Paul Lacey, who is now a good online friend of mine. Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress, is now trying to take steps to rectify the fissure in the WordPress community, and some really great people like Anne McCarthy are doing some amazing outreach. But in many ways the damage has been done, and it's going to be hard to win back those people who feel let down. Let's hope that Gutenberg has been a salutary lesson for the WordPress leadership team, and that in the future they put the WordPress family front and center of every technology decision. If they don't, then WordPress won't keep winning. As for my heart operation, Everything went to plan. It took about 2 hours and I was able to go home that night. And although my heart rhythm went crazy for my first checkup, it's been ticking like a clock for the past 10 days. Finally, I want to say a huge thank you to Tom Johnson and Ashley Nesbitt. These are humble but brilliant and incredibly talented people. If you want to see how brilliant, I'll put a link to an atrial ablation operation in the description. I recommend that you don't watch this if you're about to go for this procedure. But I repeat, don't worry, you will be fine. Thanks for watching, keep well, and I'll see you soon.